acceptable in your sight, our Lord, our rock, and our Redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. Well, good morning, everybody. It is good to be here with you. I wanted to thank you also for all the good work that you have done with CDSP seminarians over the years. I know in the last 2 years you've had Philip Lineau and Angela Furlong, who have both gone on to be ordained. Philip is now in Seattle, and Angela is now, I believe, in Frederick, Maryland. But they bring all the things that they learn here into their ministry. So I want to thank you for being such wonderful hosts and teachers to our students over the years. So before I was at CDSP, I was an intern for 10 years around the diocese. And my position at CDSP is finishing up this Friday. So I may be doing another interim, I'm not sure. In the meantime, I'm enjoying my 4 grandchildren, four grandchildren under 3. I don't really know how that happened, but we have three kids that have all moved back to the Bay Area, and 2 of them, they each had 2 kids. There's 2 2-year-olds and 2 little babies. So it's been an exciting time. So it's been a very joyful time for my husband and me. And we're looking forward to the next few years. As you probably know, we are working our way through the Gospel of Luke this summer in our readings in church during the season after Pentecost. And last week we read the parable of the mustard seed and other parables. And since our readings are somewhat consecutive, we can see that when Jesus gets into the boat today, he's just had a very long day of teaching, healing, and telling parables. Jesus begins today's story by saying to his disciples, "Let us go across to the other side." Let us go across to the other side. What does he mean by that? Jesus and his disciples are heading across to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, to the land of the Gentiles, a new territory for them, outside of their comfort zone. And Jesus is steering them into the unknown. Mark writes, leaving the crowd behind, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was. So I'm picturing that Jesus was done for the day. He was taught out. I get the sense that the disciples kind of gathered up this exhausted Jesus, brought him to the boat just as he was. And here we see the very human side of Jesus. At least 4 of the disciples were fishermen. James, John, Andrew, Simon Peter. And I can imagine them saying, "We know what we're doing, Lord. You relax. We're fishermen. We've been on the water all our lives. Leave it to us. You go down, rest down below." So that's what Jesus does. He takes a rest down below in the boat. And Mark is very particular about this scene, saying he was asleep on a cushion. When we read the story, it is helpful to know that open bodies of water were places of dread and fear for the people of Jesus' culture at that time. The danger involved in crossing open water was very real, and the wind and the sea were believed to be controlled by spirits or demons. Open bodies of water were places where people had no control. They were places of unpredictability, places of chaos. And the Sea of Galilee, which is actually a pretty shallow lake, is to this day famous for sudden windstorms that can come out of nowhere. This is not the only miracle story that happens during a storm on the Sea of Galilee in the boat. As you know, there's also the story of Jesus walking on the water, which happens a little later. And it's important to remember that they are two different stories. In fact, in today's story, Jesus is going across the lake towards the land of the Gentiles. And when Jesus walks on the water, the disciples are coming back towards their home base of Capernaum. So each time they cross the Sea of Galilee, Jesus performs a miracle on the water. Perhaps this is significant. In both stories, Jesus reveals more of who he is. And by going across the chaotic sea with him, the disciples are forced to wrestle with who Jesus is, with both his humanity and his divinity. Let us go across to the other side. Mark writes, "A great windstorm arose and the waves beat into the boat, so that the boat was already being swamped. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him up and said to him, 'Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?'" Good question. What is Jesus doing here? Is it a test of his disciples' faith? Did he think they could handle the storm all by themselves? They're fishermen, after all. Did he underestimate their level of fear? I don't know, but I do know that the disciples are human. They were probably pretty skilled sailors. And at the same time, their identities are beginning to shift. They were fishermen, but now they are becoming disciples. They are no longer who they were. Their world is changing. It's disorienting. What did Jesus mean when he said, "Let us go across to the other side"? They're gripped by fear. Where is Jesus? Why is he below decks? "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" I think we can all relate to this scene on a personal level. We think we have it all figured out. Things are going smoothly. And then we realize that the world as we know it is changing beyond our control. Why can't some things stay the same? We wonder, where is Jesus in the chaos? "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" In my own life, I have to say the changes at the seminary, where I studied for my MDiv in the early 2000s, and where I've worked for the past 2 years, have caused me to say that a few times. "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" Because the world around us has changed, the seminary has closed its in-person program, and now all the students are online all across the country, and they will gather in person off-site several times a year. CDSP is leading the Graduate Theological Union, the consortium of theological schools in Berkeley that's been there for about 60 years. We had our last service in our chapel last week. There's a lot of uncertainty about what's happening to the campus. A cherished way of learning and being us are grieving. "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" I'm sure that role is changing, and that can be as disorienting as a windstorm. This is happening all over the church, and not just our church. I see it all around the diocese. Things like the neighborhood changing, COVID took a toll on attendance, people have moved, kids' soccer games happen on Sunday morning. We don't have the volunteers we used to have. Where is Jesus in all of this chaos? Jesus says, let us go over to the other side. Notice that Jesus says to the disciples and to us, let us go across to the other side. He invites the disciples into the boat with him. Jesus invites us as Christians to get into the boat with him too. We are not in this alone. He is with us. Throughout Christian history, the boat has been a symbol for the church. It's one reason that this part of the church is called the nave, which is Latin for navy. It's this curved ceiling, and it looks like a boat if we turned it upside down. The forces of chaos and change have always been there, tossing the disciples, the church, and now us on a bumpy ride. But I think it's especially true now for us, leaving this era of Christendom when the church in America was really this bedrock institution of the community. We really are crossing over to the other side of the unknown. But we have Jesus with us, and I see him getting up off the cushion below decks. Jesus wakes up, and the Greek word that Mark uses for to wake is the same word that Mark uses for the resurrection. Jesus rebukes the wind, using the same word he uses when he rebukes unclean spirits possessing people. Jesus says to the storm, peace, be still. Amy Jill Levine, a Jewish New Testament scholar, translates this phrase from the original Greek a little more bluntly. In her translation, Jesus stands up and says, shut up, be quiet. Shut up, be quiet. It's as if he's yelling at those unclean spirits that rule the waves. And I'm kind of loving this translation of hers. We see Jesus' down-to-earth humanity and his divine power. Then the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said to the disciples, why are you afraid? Have you still no faith? And they were filled with great awe and said to one another, who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him? The miracle stories are designed to tell us something about Jesus. For the disciples and the early Jewish followers, these miracle stories on the water connected Jesus to Israel's story. He controls nature as the God of Israel controls nature in the creation story and in the Psalms. And this image of a ship, a storm, somebody sleeping below decks, the people of Jesus' time would have also made the connection to the story of Jonah, the reluctant prophet. I think our challenge, and perhaps our joy this morning, is to ask ourselves, how can a miracle story like this one work miracles on us today? It may take asking ourselves the questions that Jesus asked. Why are we afraid? Have you still no faith? And do you trust me? Can we trust Jesus to be there for us in the boat out on the rocking seas that we are all experiencing? Can we trust him to turn our faith into awe as he does with the disciples? Our fear into awe. Jesus is there with us along the bumpy ride, holding the stillness and the divine strength within him. and we can access his stillness and his divine strength whenever we call upon him for help, like the disciples did. Let us go over to the other side. Jesus also invites us to enter these challenging waters with him, to meet people we might not have ever met, to enter new situations that cause us to learn and to grow in ways we never imagined. That's certainly been my experience with Jesus once I answered the call to ordained ministry, and I see that with our students at CVSP. The new shore on the other side beckons us all into the future. For example, though I mourn the loss of CVSP's traditional program, I see the new possibilities of the hybrid program. It offers access to many more students who could not move to Berkeley. Many more students who feel called to ordained ministry. Students like your parishioner, Rachel Dykesel, who is a first-year student. There are many more possibilities opening up before us. Can we trust Jesus to lead us into new possibilities, new life? This weekend, the 81st General Convention of the Episcopal Church is underway. I have great hopes for their plans for the future, and I give thanks for all the service of Michael Curry, our presiding bishop. Jesus invites us to follow him and to trust him, to let go of our fear and to let him turn our fear into awe about the future. Let us go over to the other side. Amen. Please stand as you are able.